Welcome back to DisClaymer, episode number 8. Today's episode's on non-toxic living. So, if you don't know what non-toxic living is, you want to know why it's important, and you want to find out some actionable steps that you can take to eliminate toxins from your life, this episode's for you. Help me welcome a local Hawaiian, a business owner, an influencer. Welcome, Gage Norman.
Thanks, Clay. I'm honored to be here. It's cool. I love podcasts. I was telling you, I think I listen to like at least one a day almost. So it's cool to be on one on the other side of the podcast. It's interesting. Yeah, I started Healthware clothing about 2 years ago. It's been slow burn, as most startups are, bootstrapping it, pulling out of my pockets, the extra cash I can scrounge up to make more clothing, put into a little bit of advertising, photos, new designs, get those going. But have a lot of big dreams and visions for it. Just getting started. I love to listen to the How I Built This podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. Talks about has a bunch of entrepreneurs on and like some big brands you've heard of and their stories behind them. And so I always listen to those and I get super stoked and inspired. And I'm like, okay, if their timeline was, 5 years from conception to, a big sell or to, their big break, like, okay, I'm still on track. I'm okay. So I talk myself down. Um, but yeah, a little introduction about myself. I very passionate about health and wellness. I know we had this conversation before, and it's how we got connected through Healthware, just through basically health and wellness social media things. And so um I live in Hawaii. I love Hawaii. I love the beach. I love to surf. I love the ocean. I'm a health coach, so I do that pretty much full time right now. And I also am a personal trainer and I coach CrossFit. I've been dabbling with CrossFit in the last year. Um, I'd love to talk about that a little bit more too and my journey with that. I have a lot of mixed opinions on it, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been stretching me and I've been, taking it day by day with, training and getting after it. But yeah, what else were you trying to look for?
No, that's perfect, Gage. I appreciate you just giving the little intro. I mean, that was exactly what I was, kind of looking for. You mentioned the podcast. Is that podcast what inspired you to create Healthware? Or like not inspired like the clothing brand specifically, but for you to start a business, just out of curiosity, or
Not specifically that podcast. I don't know what it was, honestly, when I think about, me starting Healthware and then also getting we can talk about it a little bit more, but getting involved with Buzzed Honey as well. It's like a caffeinated honey brand that I've been rolling with. No, I don't know exactly what it was. It was probably just school. I ended up graduating with a business degree, took a lot of entrepreneurship classes, and just there was one where they had entrepreneurs come and visit the class and basically do like a keynote and speak to us about their brand. And we would just ask them questions. It was like a panel discussion. And basically the whole class was just based off of attendance. So if you showed up, you got 100. And so, I mean, I think I ditched a few of those classes, so I don't think I got 100, but um, it was really cool to see how people would go out and just pursue their dreams in business and kind of do that route. Yeah, I don't know specifically what it was, but I've been passionate about it and I've felt like, why not create something, if you have the chance, if you have the opportunity, why not try?
yeah, skipping classes. I mean, skipping classes for you is justifiable. You live in Hawaii, so you got to go out and
I was probably surfing or doing something like that. Yeah, most
yeah.
likely.
Something better than listening to a lecture that probably you forget about it, or you probably at least would forget about at this point. So definitely worthwhile skipping. So Gage, so just jumping right into it. For people who don't know what non-toxic living is, can you explain what non-toxic living is? Because I know that's a really big part of, the mission behind Healthware, as as to why you started it, being organic cotton and all that. So what is non-toxic living and why does it matter?
That's a great question. To put it as simply as I can, I want to say it is, I mean, obviously it's avoiding toxins, right? It's avoiding things that are going to be detrimental to your health. I'd like to hit on the point of it's pretty much impossible. It is impossible to be perfect in this area, just in the world we live in, with the amount of things uh, that are in our environment, our homes, our businesses, everything. Like we're constantly bombarded by these things, and so I think just taking small and little actionable steps in the right direction of limiting your exposure to some of these things just does so much good for your health and well-being. And so that's really what I look at when I look at my non-toxic living, habits and lifestyle.
So for someone who doesn't know what some of these things are, I know we're like you and me are super familiar. We know microplastics, phthalates, and they're all like endocrine disruptors. What sort of things are, or maybe top three that you're like, these you should avoid, just so that people who have no idea what like non-toxic living is or what they're trying to avoid, what are the kind of the top three that you're like, these are having an effect on our health detrimentally. You should look into them and avoid them.
That's a good question. Top three. Well, I personally don't drink alcohol. So that's a big one for me that I think of a toxin. And it is a personal preference. I'm not telling you to not drink alcohol. I would say to, watch your intake and, watch where you're consuming it from, like your sources. And I would say watch the amounts, right? Obviously, if you have drink an excessive amount, you have a, crazy hangover the next day, just look at like what that's doing to your body. And there's been a lot of new research, and I feel like there's a lot of people that have been kind of like not pilled to like not drink alcohol anymore, but like they've like started to drink less. Like specifically, for example, like some of the comedians that I'll listen to or follow, like they like almost degenerate drunks are now like, oh, I don't drink anymore. Like I just feel so much better. Like they're like, oh, I want to like feel better and healthier. And so they don't drink. So alcohol is a big one, I would say, is a toxin. And um that's just something that I just don't drink. But for example, like things in your environment that you might want to avoid. Um, I think one that I've cut out and watch is water. Just like try to get shower filters, filter your water if you're in your home. Try not to drink tap water if you can't. Um, and this is funny because a lot of times people will be very strong to say like, oh, there's fluoride in the water, there's, heavy metals in the water, there's all that. And yeah, you can look to see what's in your water because it's different everywhere. You check one of those sites, we could pull it up right now. It's like check your water, what's in your water. Water here is actually not terrible. Where I am, I know south side of the island, they had a really bad exposure leak from it's called Red Hill. I don't know if you're familiar, if you've heard of it. Did you?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Oh, okay. So it was a military something. Something happened where it like, leaked a bunch of like fuel into the water system
Okay.
uh through the ground. And so it was like contaminating the water. Kids were getting sick at school and stuff like that. And so they had to like do a big, like warning, like don't drink the water, all these things. And so just like examples of that um, are important to look at and check your water source on your website. But for me, specifically with water, I worked a plumbing job for a summer in Arizona. I grew up in Arizona, and just digging out some of those pipes, man, like just out of people's kitchens, like in the middle of their kitchen, just ripping up the floor and digging out the pipes, and just looking at the quality of those pipes, I'm like, oh, the water's just going straight through there, touching those pipes, and like it's gross. And like if your house is old, your pipes are probably not the cleanest and prettiest to look at. And so that was like a big thing. I was like, oh my gosh, like that kind of opened my eyes. I didn't start filtering my water until a bit later. Um, but that's just something that I do. I filter my water. I go to a nearby grocery store and I get the filtered water. I fill up gallon jugs and then I remineralize it myself.
So for people
So
who know what type of filter to get, sort of thing, what brand do you have out of curiosity?
I don't have a brand of filter. So I just go to, so a lot of stores will have a filter, filtered water the, in like, it's a health food store or a whole food store or whatever. They have like filtered water you can refill yourself. So that's what I do. If I had my own home, I rent right now. I'm still pretty young. I live on my own, so I don't own my own house. I hope to in the future, but I would probably get a reverse osmosis system. That's what my parents have, and it's just a good quality system. You can get it throughout your house. Do you have a filter?
Yeah, I have an AquaTrue, so it does the reverse
Oh, okay.
osmosis, and then
Yeah,
it also remineralizes it. So that's another key
that's
important
sweet.
factor, as you were just implying. Like, you want to eliminate all these chemicals that are in it, whether it's fluoride, chlorine, and all whatever it is. And then at that point, when it is completely filtered, obviously, as you mentioned, you want to either remineralize it with salt or have
Hmm.
it remineralized, with a filter sort of thing that adds the water or adds the minerals to the water. So yeah, so I use an AquaTrue,
That's cool.
which I just saw online and I was like, oh, it looks, pretty reputable. But yeah, it's definitely something that you can go down the rabbit hole with it. Because I mean, as you mentioned, like it's different from area to area. So, not to say that there's any perfect area, but it's going to be different depending on where you're at. So I think that's a really important factor. So alcohol, water, if there was one more that you would add and you're like, get this in your house or make sure you don't have this in your house or in general, for you personally, you like add an air filter or I don't know. Is there something that stands out?
Yeah, this is hard now that I'm getting down to the last one because I'm already thinking of like three more that I would want to take out. If I'm thinking if you haven't started anywhere and you're starting, oh man.
And feel free, you can say more than one. Like you're not limited to three. Like if you're
I'm
like,
not limited to three anymore.
you
I'll say plastics. I'll say plastics because that's gonna eliminate a lot. That's gonna cover a lot of bases, and that goes for specifically, food packaging, Tupperware, clothing, basically anything that you're gonna be using. It's a plastic, and I mean, we see the waste that happens with plastic and how, I mean, have you seen the floating island of trash in the middle of the Pacific? Have you seen the photos of that thing and how
yeah.
it's like growing? And it's just atrocious, honestly, and how gross the amount of plastics and just waste that we kind of have. And so if you're thinking from an environmental perspective, plastics are terrible for that too, because a lot of them don't really get recycled the way they're supposed to, or there's byproducts. And then obviously they break down, and then there's the microplastics, and we can talk about all of that, and that's leaching into us, and all of us have it in our blood and in our, organs now. And so it's terrible. Babies are being born with them, like because the mom gave it to them, and so it's terrible, but I think it's very easy things to start making swaps for, right? Replace all your glasses in your house. Go back to glass. They're prettier, like they're fancier. It's nicer. Like just go get glass, like glasses for your water, dinner plates. Like go back to China. Go to like you know what I'm saying? Like get nice quality things and reuse them, like jars. Like I have like old honey jars that are glass that I'll just rip off the label and I use to like store other things or things like that. Old pickle jars. Like just use glass. I use a glass water bottle. That's what I do. Like I just reuse my like Mountain Valley spring water bottle, or I have these glass jugs from milk that I will reuse. And so I don't know. I just say plastics. That's gonna be my third answer. But there are some more we could talk about that I would like to.
Yeah, no, that was a good one. I like that I'm glad that you said that. So for someone's like who like again clearly has no idea why this is all important, what's wrong with plastic? Like is there something in plastic? As you mentioned, like, it's getting into babies and we all have it in our blood. What's wrong with it? What effect is it having on you or me or in general, like humans? Is it affecting
Yeah.
any?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's more and more research that's coming out. There's like specific scientists now that are like microplastic researching scientists. Like that is their specialty. And I think it's like fascinating to go into some of their research. And it's ever evolving. They're finding it, in more and more things. So uh, with plastics, it's hard to tell. Like, who knows? You might not feel different like right now because you're using plastic, but like if you cut it out, you might start feeling better, right? And so it's just like, why not try? And then for the level of the environment and just like a waste perspective, like, you want to have a big footprint or do you not? Like, break it down that way. And I think one big thing too with plastics is just realizing where they are. They're hiding, like clothing. Like, that's why I started Healthware. Polyester, if you see that on a label, which is most clothing nowadays, there's a blend of cotton, polyester, whatever. Like, any athletic fabric clothing. I used to like, and I'm guilty as charged. When I played football and sports growing up, I always wanted Under Armour, stretchy, Nike Dry Fit. I was a fiend for those. Like, that's what I wanted. I made my parents get them for me for every Christmas and birthday. Like, I thought they looked cool. The athletes were wearing them. But I didn't realize like it's just plastic. Like, if you go through, we could show a video of the fiber being made and it's just plastic being strung together and then woven together. And bacteria grows on it more. That's why they stay smellier. My old football pads and my old football clothes, my mom used to make me keep in the garage growing up because they stunk so bad because they couldn't, I'd wash them and it just wouldn't, the bacteria wouldn't get out. I just smelled like BO all the time. Puberty didn't help me in any means by that, avenue too. But, the plastics, I think you hit on that, phthalates, and all these other like compounds in these plastics are they're harmful for our and like our endocrine system basically, right? They're gonna mess with our hormones, mess with our thyroid. So overall, those things you don't want to mess with if you want to thrive. And so try to, I don't know, limit the exposure to plastics as much as you can, I would say.
That was a really good rundown. I appreciate you just kind of clearing the air there and making it really clear to people. So like there's kind of a balance here, right? Because like as you were mentioning, like you don't want to go overboard to an extent because then that can kind of cause anxiety and stuff like that. But you see a lot of this like fear mongering or like people creating, you know, catchy clips to kind of entice you like, oh, this is terrible. And it's kind of like to an extent, it's hard to know what is right, what is wrong. But to get to more the fear mongering, how do you specifically kind of balance that where you're like, okay, I'm not going to stress if I'm going out with a couple of friends to have, you know, a little bit of food sort of thing. And who knows if the food's made in seed oils or whatever it is, and who knows if the water is going to be filtered. So where does that balance kind of come in for you, Gage?
A good question as well. For me, the balance comes down to just trying not to beat myself up too much. Especially for those like kind of type A individuals, all or nothing, or you want to be perfect. You're never going to be perfect. And I think we talked a little bit about this too, a little bit before we got on the call, but treating ourselves like we would with others, like you give other people a lot more grace than you give yourself. And so just realizing those small steps you are taking are making a difference as well and giving yourself some credit there where you're like, man, if I wasn't somewhat aware of any of this, I would not be feeling as good as I am. And knowing like, okay, one meal out of the week, one meal out of the month, whatever it is, like, I mean, as a health coach, you always hit on the like 80/20, like kind of balance, like you're trying to get people to, and a lot of times they're trying to get up to that 80, like we're already probably at 80 or higher. And so if we do implement some of that 20, like that's our balance, right? Of a little bit less here and there. So I think for me, like, if I'm like, man, really and truly, if I have, go out to eat with my friends and a lot of times I will try to lean towards better options than others. And so really and truly it's like, man, I'm like 90/10, 95/5 like balance where that little small percent is really not going to do that much where I'm not having it every meal every day. It's not that detrimental.
Was there a point in your life where you overstressed about it and then you had to pull back?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about this too. My journey with health and wellness started a couple years ago. I I don't know why. I still don't know to this day. I'd like to go back and figure out specifically why I felt the way I did and how bad I felt. I've been listening to a lot of different people's experiences with mold toxicity and with basically just like HPA axis dysfunction, things like that, and on that nature. I don't know exactly what it was. I never got a specific answer from any doctor. I got a bunch of different answers, and that was really frustrating. Seeing a bunch of different endocrinologists and doctors and specialists and never really getting a specific answer. Kind of sparked me down a path that, I mean, put me where I am now, and I'm grateful for it. But it put me into a dark place of like needing or feeling like I needed to be perfect, right? It's like I started to take my health into my own hands because the doctors weren't giving me the answers that I hoped for, looked for. I started feeling better when I started making a lot of these changes and swaps. I started being like extra dialed, with sleep and nutrition and exercise, and became pretty regimented. Like I was like, okay, like got to get my morning sun. I got to watch the sunset, like get my circadian rhythm set. And like I've gotten so much better into so much better of a place where I do have more leeway now. Like, oh, if I do stay up an extra couple hours because I'm enjoying some time with friends or my girlfriend or whatever, like I'm not gonna die. Like I'm resilient enough now, but back then I wasn't, right? A little thing like that would have set me off and I would have had, insomnia for a week or two again or whatever it was that was just awful. And I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. Like I did not feel good. It was bad. And so, but the anxiety was worse. I think you were hitting on that. Like the fear of breaking the cycle of the perfect nutrition streak day, the perfect sleep, whatever it was. The anxiety of breaking that was stressing me out more, and I think it was making it worse. And so I had to like find a balance, and I've definitely come into that. And I think CrossFit actually played a role into that as well, if like, which is interesting, right? And so that's something that in the last year or so has been kind of helpful for me.
I want to get into CrossFit, but I wanted to ask you a question kind of came to mind. Was it around that time when you were in that, like, you were that, I don't want to call it extremism, but I relate and I was very extreme at a certain point and still can be sometimes. But was it around that point when you launched Healthware, or when did you launch Healthware?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is exactly when it was. So that whole extremism time period for me was I started cutting out everything. I was like, no, I'm full organic produce, vegetables, fruits, only grass-fed meat. I'm not even gonna touch really any fish, like, because they're all contaminated, whatever it was. Like, I was super strict. Now I have a lot more of a balance. Like, I do lean into a lot of those things still. Don't get me wrong. Like, I choose organic when I can. I choose grass-fed when I can. But I'm not so strict on it to where it's like I get anxious if it's not. You know what I mean? Like because majority of the time I am choosing that, I think it's doing my body good enough to where I'm more resilient for when it's not, right? I know I trust in my body that I'm like, oh, I know that I can detox some of these things. Like we have pathways for that. Like if I'm supporting them and I have enough nutrition and sleep and I'm getting out in the sun, I'm going in the sauna, like, oh, like whatever it was, like it doesn't matter. My body is like resilient. And I tell myself, like, man, I went, 20 something years not giving any effort or care about any of this stuff. And I felt there were times where I was thriving then too. Like it doesn't mean I was sick the whole time. Like obviously I wasn't in the greatest health for a lot of it, but there was times where I wasn't. And so yeah, Healthware was born because I was like, man, there's plastic in everything. I'm trying to get some clothes. There's nothing. I want to start something. So that was born. I had a roommate that I started it with, and good friend. So Braden, shout him out. Love the guy. And so yeah, that was like part of like why I got born. We're like, dude, like let's go. Let's take this on. Like there is no like athletic wear that's not plastic. Let's get this started. And so, I have we talked about some of the dreams and aspirations. Like I would love to get, NIL deals and sponsor college athletes and get our, athletic wear out there. And so it'd be super cool to see like, Healthware logo on like a sports jersey one day, we're sponsoring some league. I don't know. But lots of big dreams and aspirations. It's just slow burn when you're bootstrapping it, don't have the capital to really shoot it.
Yeah, well, you're inspiring. Like, I think the number one, the logo is really appealing, and like the whole message behind it is pretty awesome too. And there's no better person to be leading it besides you, Gage. Not to,
Thank
like,
you.
not to like, boost your ego and all that. But I wanted to get to two more things. So I wanted to get to healthware, and I want to also go into CrossFit real quick. So
Yeah.
how did CrossFit kind of help you find that balance? You mentioned that it really helped you. What did it help you with most? And can you kind of just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. So when I started revamping nutrition, exercise, sleep, lifestyle, everything, big thing was like exercise. Before I got, let's just say like my sick period, when I got sick, whatever, I was deep into running. I was running marathons, big runner, and I still tried to lift weights on the side, like because I enjoyed it. Um, growing up playing sports and stuff, like I still like to lift weights. It wasn't kind of the way I am doing it now with my different training style now, but I would still try to lift weights here and there. But I was running a lot of volume and mileage in running, and so um, that probably took a toll on my body too, like my immune system and whatnot. But um, when I got into CrossFit in the last year, what it did was it took me out of this like exercise needs to be perfect, because I was like, man, if I don't have like my perfect training block plan for the week, and if I'm not getting, my X amount of zone two, my 3 days or 4 days a week of resistance with these compound lifts and these weights, like, and I was like, it has to be at this time. I have to have this fuel pre-workout a couple hours before. I need my, post-workout meal to have X amount of protein within X amount of hours. And I was super regimented. And like I did that for a while and I just wasn't enjoying it. Like it was good. It was good for my body. I think it helped me get out of what I was because I was like super strict about it and like, but I just wasn't enjoying it. And so CrossFit really opened this new door to competition that I haven't had in a while, which there's a healthy dose of it, right? Like there's limits, but I think it's fun. The community aspect, the people here that I train with, it's so fun. I love coaching them. I love working out with them. I love seeing them grow, push weights, PRs. I love, having them push me. So that's a big aspect that's been really good. And I think that's goes on to the whole social aspect and community. And I think that's one thing we could talk about with like, I just was listening to somebody else talk about this with blue zones being that there's actually nothing with blue zones that is correlated. Like people try to hit on like nutrition or what they're eating. None of it's actually correlated or the same other than the social aspect and that they have that like community. They have, yeah, basically that. That's like the only thing that really is consistent between them all. Um, yeah, we could talk more about that. But um, so the community aspect of CrossFit and then just the different training styles and realizing that training can be fun again and um, not so regimented. Like some days I'm like, man, I can only squeeze in my workout right after I coach. I only have 30 minutes or shoot, it's going to be at 4 p.m. because I was busy this morning or whatever. Like it's now variable and it doesn't like matter so much the timing. For me, I know there is an optimal way. Like I'll listen to Huberman, I'll listen to these guys. There is optimal ways to work out. But for me right now in this season of life, it's what has been helping me get out of this like anxiety producing, like I have to be perfect. Like it's just get it in, have fun with it because I am super like interested in the exercise science aspect of like optimal training and how to get the most out of, whether it be hypertrophy, strength, endurance, things like that. CrossFit goes kind of against all of that in a way. But on the same time, at the same time, now that I've been training it, I also haven't felt this, fast, explosive, strong, uh, like strong endurance base. Like than I have in my entire life. And it kind of goes against all of the things that I mean, I don't do a specific like training program per se right now with CrossFit. Like I'm not doing like a Metcon every single day, but I am doing a lot like more throughout the week where it's like it goes a little bit against my brain. That's like counterintuitive. Like, man, I did wall balls yesterday or 2 days ago. Now I'm doing front squats. Like it's like the same movement. I'm just like blasting the same muscles. It's like it doesn't make sense. They're not recovered. So I don't know. It's just interesting, but it's gotten me out of that. Does that kind of answer your question?
No, that does. I'm a little familiar with CrossFit. Like I know what it is, but I wanted to ask you how it oh you my mind kind of went in two different directions there. Because yes, you answered the question. But I wanted to ask you, you said CrossFit doesn't necessarily kind of like do that optimization for like the body and all that. Can you explain that a little bit? Like I'm not familiar with CrossFit, or for people who aren't familiar with it, can you kind of explain, why it doesn't kind of go with the optimization of the training?
Yeah, yeah. So CrossFit's um training style is a lot of similar. Well, it kind of depends on your programming.
Okay.
I mean, you'll before I got into it, CrossFit, in my mind, from what I'd heard from other people, what I understood about it was that it was um, too intense all the time, and like I'm trying to think of like just beating yourself up too much, and you got to like hit that limit, like reps in reserve and RPE for strength and hypertrophy, and like finding that balance when you're at the gym to get the most exercise benefit and then also have that recovery so that you're actually progressing, right? A lot of
Mhm.
times people will find themselves in this kind of hamster wheel, and I'll see this from time to time, even from people I see training CrossFit and members and things like they do want to make changes when it comes to building muscle or body composition, losing fat, whatever it is. And, just doing a Metcon, which is a metabolic conditioning workout for those that aren't familiar, in the morning. And that's kind of like that high intensity kind of type stuff. So it's like you're doing, CrossFit blends them all. So it could be, an Olympic lift. It could be like a lot of snatches with, a rowing component, rowing for meters, and it's all for time and it's pretty quick, right? It might be like 10 to 20 minutes. Um, and if you know exercise science, you know that like by doing that every single day, you're not going to get an adaptation that you want, whether it be, build muscle, burn body fat. Like for those that are new to it, they're going to see changes and they're probably going to see changes fast, especially if they're coming off the couch. Because now they're just moving their body in this new stimulus and they're going to be sore every single day for like months because it's all new and it's all adapted. Um, but specifically with CrossFit, I don't know if I'm like answering your question well. For me, it's been cool to see that like competitive aspect for myself. And then it's just novel. It's a lot of things that I didn't do before. And so it's like, okay, how can I take some of these movements, incorporate them into my training? Because I'm finding that the Olympic lifts are really fun. Snatches and power cleans and split jerks and all these things that you'll see in the Olympics and stuff, and people putting up ridiculous amounts of weight, and it just makes you like super motivated. You're like, how are they doing that? Like I am like lifting a quarter of that and like I can't even do it. And so that aspect of like I want to do better at that and seeing changes and getting stronger in different areas on that aspect. Mobility wise on like they call them just gymnastics movements in CrossFit. So it's like, you're doing handstand push-ups or handstand walks. You're like upside down on your hands. You're doing like bar work. So you're on the pull-up bar and you're doing, pull-ups and muscle-ups and um, movements like that, or you're on the rings and doing things like that. And so those are fun too because it's novel, it's new, it's different.
No, you're a beast. Like that type of stuff is so impressive. I think gymnastics in general, I mean, to a lot of people, is one of the most you got to be in really good shape to do that type of stuff. Like the men, I see the movements that you do with the rings and stuff like that. You're an absolute animal. So that's really interesting that CrossFit had such a major impact on your perception of like health and all that. I think it's a tool, it's kind of like there's so many different tools for different people in terms of like overcoming that perfectionism or anxiety. And I'm glad I'm glad it helped you because it's it's a tough kind of like battle to work on because you're trying to do something good and then it causes, other anxieties. So but in saying all that, we only have like a minute left. So I want to have you, if you're willing to, plug whatever you want. A couple businesses, Healthware, Buzz Honey, your socials, so that people can reach out to you. I'm going to put them in the comments below, and then leave them with one final message. We have 30 seconds to see if you can squeeze it all in.
Okay, yeah. You can follow me on Instagram, just Gage Norman. Been working on healthware clothing. You can find that on Instagram too. Buzz Honey as well. Um, Sell that on our website and on Amazon. And one final message. Um, I think just you have more control over your health and environment than you might think. That'll be my message. Take control of it and do the things that you can, because you have a little bit more control than you think.
Thank you, Gage. You're a beast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening, friends. If you're still here, I have an exclusive gift for you, so don't leave yet. Code CLAY will save you 10% out checkout at Healthware. I'll put the description below. And in saying all of that, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode or learned something new about non-toxic living or Gage, please like and subscribe. Give a little comment. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care.